this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a paper rose. Now, you can use any color paper you want. If all you have is white paper, that's fine. You can either just make white roses. There are white roses out there. Or you could color the paper first using paint, watercolor, markers, crayons, color pencils, whatever you want, and then do this process. I happen to have some construction paper, so I'm going to be using a piece of pink because I'm going to make a pink rose for myself. In order to do this rose paper flower, you're going to need some sort of paper, whatever color or method you want, as I explained. You may want a stencil of some sort, something that will help you make a circle shape, but it's not necessary if you want to just draw a circle with your hand. So anything that will give you a circle shape. You'll also want, obviously, a pencil to draw that circle shape. You're going to need a pair of scissors, and you're going to need something to stick your rose together. It could be a glue stick, could be liquid glue, could be tape. Whatever you want to use is going to be great. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is create my circle stencil. So I'm actually going to use this roll of tape. I could trace the inside, I could trace the outside, however I want to do it. Depends on how big of a rose you want. The bigger the circle, the bigger the rose. So if you want to do a few different roses, you might want a few different size circles. So I'm going to do one that's using the inside. It's actually almost the same size as that. And maybe one using the outside, just so you can see the different sizes you can get with your rose. And it's okay if it's not 100% perfect. Don't worry about it. It's not going to be the end of the world. Now, this next step, you can either pre-draw your spiral or just cut and make your spiral as you're cutting. So I'm going to do one where I pre-draw and one where I don't. So I'm going to start on the outside edge here, and I'm just going to draw a spiral shape until I get to the middle. I'm not going to connect it anywhere. I'm just going to go to the middle. You can do the same with this one, or you can just cut it like normal. So now I'm going to cut these out and I will come right back. Okay, they're cut out. So like I said, you could pre-draw the spirals if that helps you, or if you think you can just do it without drawing, that's okay. But you're going to take your scissors, you're going to cut on the line if you pre-drew the spiral. This is why pre-drawing might not be a bad idea, because it can keep you on track. Make sure you're doing this slowly so that you don't accidentally cut off parts that you already did. Like, I don't want to cut that part off. I want to make sure that I'm just cutting right on the line and nowhere else. I'm being really careful about this. Okay, so that spiral is cut. And if you want to just free draw a spiral with scissors, you can do the same thing. So I'm just going to keep on turning with one hand, using this hand to turn the paper with, and this hand is doing all of the cutting. And I'm going to keep going until I decide where my center is. Doesn't matter how thick or thin these are, it is going to change the look of your rose a little bit depending on how thick or thin, but that's something you can kind of experiment with and discover as you go along. Okay, so now I have two spirally little circles, right? So now we're going to turn these into roses. How are we going to do that? Okay, so the first step is I'm going to start on the outside here. It's pretty easy. And I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to have this in one hand, take my other hand, and I'm going to start pushing the paper towards itself so it starts curling like this. So I'm kind of trying to go like this with my fingers and making this sort of motion. So this finger is staying mostly still, this finger is moving so that I can create sort of a spiral shape as I'm going. And I'm doing it kind of slowly so I can kind of make sure that I am keeping track of what I'm doing. And I'm not worrying about it being too tight or too perfect, because I want this to be kind of big and loose, kind of like a big fat flower. I'm just going to keep turning this and turning it. It gets a little tricky as you get closer to the center. I'm holding it a different way now. Now I'm using my fingers here to hold the top and bottom so it keeps it from unspiraling, and I'm still doing the same motion I was doing before with these fingers on the outside. Again, you can make your rose as tight or as loose as you want. And, ooh, I'm getting really close to the end here. And here I am at the very end with this little funny nub left over. This is the part that I want to tape down so that everything stays spiraled together so it doesn't all fly apart. It stays together pretty well as it is, but I want to make sure that this little nub stays put together. So if the only thing you have to put it together is tape, that's fine. If you have some liquid glue, you can use some liquid glue. If it starts unspiraling on you, you can respiral it. But you can see even when I let go, it still has a really pretty sort of boingy little rose shape to it. Okay, but I do want to keep it together a little bit, so I'm going to add some glue to the bottom. Like I said, you could use liquid glue, glue stick, you can use tape, whatever works for you. Ooh, that was tough to get off. I'm going to use some glue stick, mostly because I find it to be a little easier to work with as far as the drying time. It goes a little bit faster. So I'm just adding like a chunk of glue to the bottom there, and I'm just going to glue it to that. And there we have one little rosebud. And you're going to continue, and again, if it's boinging around too many other places, you can always add a little glue to other parts of your flower and try to get them to stick together a little bit better. But I don't really mind that it has sort of this 3D sort of popping out effect where it kind of moves around and boings around a little bit. I kind of like that because I think it makes it feel a little bit more fun to look at, fun to interact with, and a little bit slightly more realistic actually, because it has a little more movement to it. So I'm going to make my other rose and show you what that looks like. Now, as I'm working on this larger one, the other thing that you could be doing as you go along is adding a little bit of glue to the spiral as you are spiraling it up. That'll just help hold things together a little bit better. So if that's something you want to do, you could totally do that as you're going along, but you don't have to. Just something that I wanted to bring up as an option if you were interested in trying to keep your pieces together a little bit easier. That is another choice that you could be making for yourself. But like I said, part of what makes these roses pop out and look so big and fun is the fact that they kind of expand when you let go. So you might want to not do this because you might want to make sure that it expands without getting stuck in place. It just depends on what kind of rose you want. If you want a really tight rose or if you want a rose that's a little bit looser and fuller like the first one. So your choice is 100% totally up to you. But I'm going to try this one with gluing a little bit as I go along just to kind of see if that helps keep my pieces from falling apart on me too much. I'm going to do a good bit more glue at the end here because this is the part that I want to really have stick no matter what happens. So now that I'm here, I can leave it a tight rose just like this, or I can, before I glue my final piece, let some of this loosen up a little bit. And because I did do some gluing, it's probably not going to get super loose. But if I kind of let it unspiral just a tiny bit on the inside, or at least on the outside petals, it's going to feel a little bit looser. And what I'm doing is doing a little bit of an unwinding kind of effect. I'm going back the other direction just to let them kind of loosen up a little bit. So making paper flowers kind of takes a little bit of finesse. That means moving your fingers around and trying to kind of make things kind of go together. And there I have my end where I'm really glued that last part. And this one is a much tighter rose. You can see the difference between a looser rose and a tighter rose. It's really personal preference on if you like the looser rose look or if you like the tighter rose look. Both are great, both work well, but you'll notice that because I made this one tighter, even though it was a much bigger circle, it ends up being about the same size as my small rose because it's a much tighter one. So you get to decide which way you think looks best. And if you have a closed up rose like that, you might want to leave it like that. If you have a really empty space there, you might want to put something in there, or just leave it empty. Maybe you want to put a bead in there, maybe a pom-pom, maybe something that's fluffy and fun, or a little sparkly gem if you happen to have one kicking around. That might look really pretty. So these then you could be gluing to your final piece as a beautiful rose bouquet.